Hey, hi everybody, welcome to the Radical Film Network conference. Please take a seat. There are some chairs in here which are empty. There are some chairs there. There are some free chairs over there because we're going to start pretty soon. So take a seat and let's start. Okay? Thanks.
Hola, gracias por venir a todas y gracias a la Maliciosa por acogernos. Y vamos a presentar brevemente qué es lo que va a suceder.
Hello, thank you for coming. Thank you to the Maliciosa for receiving us. And we are going to present what is going to happen now.
Lo que vamos a presentar es Modou. Modou es este chico senegalés que llegó a España. Digo chico porque cuando llegó tenía 16 años y vino a España para tratarse un cáncer en 1999 y murió en 2003.
We are going to present some poems of this boy. He is a French speaker boy from Senegal. When he came to Spain in 2000, he came to be treated for his cancer and to reunite with his father.
Cuando Modou vino porque el padre, que había cruzado el estrecho a finales de los 90, lo trajo. En esos 3 años, de 1999 a 2003, Modou se convirtió en poeta y estuvo aprendiendo español. En esos 3 años, Modou adquirió una enorme madurez y rara. Rara lo digo por los poemas, porque alguien con 19 años que escribe esos poemas es alguien que ha comprendido de qué va todo esto.
Modou came to Spain with 60 years. When he was 16 years old, he came to Spain in 2000. He was treated for his cancer, and during these 3 hard years, he became extremely matured. And he became a poet during these 3 years. And what more? And he was nearly able to understand what is happening here.
Modou nunca aparece en esta película, lo que aparece son sus poemas, que lo van a leer 9 compañeras. Modou era senegalés y escribía en francés. Se van a leer en francés, en inglés y en español. Y por una parte hablamos de Modou y ahora por otra parte hablo brevemente de los archivos.
You are not going to watch Modou. Modou doesn't appear in these films, in these archives, film archives. What you are going to listen are their poems, their 9 poems. He didn't write any other theme. And we are going to read the poems in English, in Spanish, and in French. And now I am going to explain you what are you going to watch.
Por otra parte, los archivos pertenecen todos a una zona de España muy determinada, a la zona fresera de Huelva, a mi pueblo. Son archivos de mi pueblo que empecé a filmar en 2002 y lo sigo filmando, estamos en 2024. Las situaciones laborales de los migrantes y las migrantes siguen siendo exactamente las mismas y es lo que aparecerá en los archivos.
What you are going to watch are film archives that I started filming in 2000. I have been filming this from 2000 to 2024 in the strawberry growing area of my little country in Huelva, in Andalusia, and I am still filming this kind of archives about the bad condition of the working condition of the people in that area.
Y ya con esto termino, me despido. Yo con el pasar de los años, se han pasado ya 22 años desde que filmé por primera vez las condiciones laborales de la gente que trabajan, de los trabajadores y trabajadoras que trabajan en el campo. Cuando filmé por esto, durante mucho tiempo seguía filmando, pero era incapaz de ponerle sonido a esta película, a esto que debería ser una película y no es una película, son archivos sueltos. Entonces, cuando me llegó los poemas de Modou hace 3 años, un amigo poeta, el poeta Enrique Falcó, me mandó estos poemas y comprendí que esta era la pista de sonido de la película, que en cada sitio lo leen, gente que colabora diferente. Muchas gracias.
Sorry, I forgot something before. I am the professional translator. So Modou died in the 2003. And these archives are about the work conditions of people. And at the beginning, it was a silent film. But when I read the poems by Modou, I discovered that this was the soundtrack of the film, so this is the soundtrack that you are going to listen. Thank you.
Apagamos esta luz de aquí, por favor.
De muros en la frontera española con Ceuta y Melilla que haga infranqueable el paso fronterizo.
Que los primeros 5 o 6 metros han de ser de hormigón para que no permitan el que se puedan abrir, el que se puedan romper.
Sin la espuma del oro puedo bañarme. Soy como el oro, soy como el oro, contra más me desprecia, más valor tomo. Contra más me desprecia, más valor tomo.
Están entrando en Europa, no son en Ceuta y Melilla, están entrando en Europa.
El mundo es infiel a mis sueños. Nada más que gaviotas sangrientas, golondrinas de luto, nada más que buitres de fuego, águilas de incendio. Pero el amor, terco, me lanza guiños violentos y al final de las promesas, axilas de sombra, noches locas como el deseo. Pero a pesar del juego fácil, tengo en estas noches, lejos de las estrellas, porque sé que la luna no lo vigila todo, risas de niños y alegrías de hombre. Debo todavía levantar corazones arrodillados, hablar a los cuchillos de odios, caminar sobre los miedos lavados, gritar al sol que caliente el camino de los inviernos, devolver el grito de las fieras. Mis hermanos se han quedado alucinados, busco la multitud del mundo, porque el mundo tiene que darse la mano, allí donde la soledad es como un vasto desierto, las fraternidades. Y tantas veces recorro el camino del desastre, herido en la lengua y desangrado en el alma, sosteniendo mis brazos pueblos vanos, pueblos que se proclaman el ombligo del mundo, pueblos que se proclaman el único Dios del mundo, pueblos que se proclaman la raza elegida del mundo. Pero yo soy de un pueblo ebrio del universal, habitado por la comunión y compartiendo el mundo, y no el único barquero de la tierra. Y sí, quiero cantar, quiero llorar, necesito otros estribillos, otros hermanos, y no sé si podré dar de comer a mi voz.
Mes frères, il nous faut ainsi porter le monde à travers, sans les routes mal dessinées. L'appel profond, les regards sans issue, les mensonges à chapeau blanc, la haine parmi la haine améliorée, la fraternité du paix, L'amour crucifié. L'ancêtre giflé. Le père giflé. La mère giflé. J'ai veillé ce ciel, cette terre, ces hommes, ces femmes, ces enfants qui ne chantent plus, ces mères qui ne versent plus, ces pères de lointaine paternité, ces vieillards qui ne comptent plus. J'ai veillé ce pays, mon pays, ce pays fou de ses filles, fou de sa liberté, infidèle de ses rêves. Mais le monde oublié dans le sang. Et les femmes sont amputées du rêve des mères, des hommes, du rêve de vieillir. Et mes rêves sont pleins de poissons grillés. C'est ce moi tapis au fond de mes routes, car les yeux s'élèvent sous des jeunesses amères, et dévoilent les passants sans les chemins, et fouillent l'exil gardé. Demain, peut-être rendez-le-moi. Les jours, rendez-le-moi seulement si l'enfant répond à joueur, la maman à bercer, les soldats à s'attendrir. Je suis la nuit fidèle, les jours sifflent et longs, mais la honte dans la roue. Les jours donnent tout au jour, les paix au monde. Ne plus voter que pour l'amour de l'homme, ne plus appartenir à un seul pays, à une seule race, à un seul continent, à un seul bonheur, mais à tous les pays, toutes les races, tous les continents, tous les bonheurs. Alors, les cœurs, tous les cœurs, finiront de pétrir la main douce argile pour la main douce toi des hommes, mes frères. J'ai fini par habiter le ciel du monde et les sangs interminables des jours. Mais parce que j'étais avec vous, souffrance, je sais bien que l'amour existe. Et parce que l'amour existe, je ne vais plus pleurer parce que j'ai été courtisé tard. Je ne pourrai pas haïr. Parce que j'ai vécu toutes les saisons, je pardonnerai toujours. Déjà, j'entends la pluie sous mes rêves de juin. Je finirai par redonner via à l'idéal ruissé, au nom du mur debout de l'amour, debout dans mes silences. L'alphabet de ma langue commence par communautaire. Mon salut est d'amour, et je suis soldat d'une patrie infinie.
The world has matured. The world has matured. Men have become monsters. The cruel cities, the beasts go their own way by day. However, there is a priest who is still a priest. In the jungle with faith, only him Pep Boades stay. In sorrowful and mourning lands, rooms of loneliness and crying, holding each wounded hand in his hands, wanting to relieve so much pain and knowing your endeavour is vain. Hate has crouched over me, but he has helped me tear his mouth and his belly out of my hopeful laughter. And the men who carried it, they run naked through the streets, aging men speaking to the shadows, drinking from wineskins of wind their own memory. The pains of the world cover my heart, and the mantle of misery weighs on my shoulders. Everything has been taken from love. There is nothing left in our bodies and in our hands but the bleeding sores of hate. Even if it is only because of the eyes of the children who understand nothing of our crimes, let's try to love each other and open together all the gates.
Quiero ser el hombre de la tierra, la mujer, el niño, la tierra, aún la tierra, pero nunca ser un viejo con corazón carroñero, el malvado vertebrado, nunca el hombre que pudre cuanto es bello. Quiero vivir sin permiso, reír sin permiso, llorar sin permiso. Quiero bailar sin permiso, odiar sin permiso, perdonar sin permiso. Quiero morir sin permiso, pudrirme sin permiso. Llegar a ser flor sin permiso, brotar como hierba silvestre, ser tierra y mar sin permiso ser sueño, sin memoria, sin rostro. Quiero hacer callar de vergüenza la noche, sin permiso resonar como tam, tam salvaje, sin permiso gritar, ¡libertad! Puede ser que mañana seamos viejos, con tantos soles en nuestros corazones, tanto amor por vivir, tantos ecos locos por contestar, tantas ofrendas en que empeñarse, tantas sendas noches en las que dejar la huella de nuestra juventud. Quizás mañana seamos, sí, por fin compañeros del invierno.
Tant qu'il y a le ciel, il y a toujours l'espoir qu'un oiseau y part et tu marcheras le corps à pierre. D'un port en port, de quoi encore, de tout en tout, qu'on importera les froids, qu'on importera les pluies, et les soleils, même nous, comme à un moment donné-moi les pieds du ciel. Je ne dirai jamais assez, mais reconnaîtrai à les femmes, à l'amour, je leur dois des sisters, brissons à l'épée, à bronze à les plumes, libères à les rêves, et que les poètes pérennes relèvent des soldats. La mort est un seul cri. Si les bras, ces seuls et nous souffrions après et la soif. J'ai défrate la façade du mur de Heinz, j'ai fini la salle, l'amour pour tout vaincra.
The city is big. The city is big in my head, yet my steps are brief in the street. All courses are available to me, but many doors are closed for me. My doorway opens onto a closed door. My window looks out over closed windows, homes I'd like to enter to share the friendship I'm carrying, the peace I want for everyone. And I keep going my way without understanding too much. Perhaps the time has come to drink the wild honey. I don't sleep anymore. I just gaze at the city. Why do we build houses where loneliness watches over us, where we hide our tears, where we cry for unrequited love? The city is big in my head, but the doors without flowers and the patios without flowers, why? And I have nothing to laugh about, believe in, or love, but the certainty of heaven, the certainty of sidewalks, gazes, noises, the certainty of day and night. Otherwise, it is, again, infinite hopes, infinite sobs, infinite suicides, broken promises.
La esperanza. Puesto que hay cielo, hay siempre esperanza de que un ave lo cruce. Me llevaría consigo. El cuerpo en oración, de puerta en puerta, de tejado en tejado, de corazón en corazón. ¿Qué importará el frío, la lluvia? Del sol yo tomo alimento. Como limosna, dadme el cielo azulado. Nunca será bastante mi gratitud a la mujer, al amor. Les debo la existencia. Rompamos las espadas, enarbolemos plumas, liberemos el sueño y que el poeta releve a los soldados. El amor es un único grito. Si es verdad, sus ecos bastan para vivir, para sobrevivir. He destruido la fachada tapiada del odio. Finalizo el asalto. El amor es más fuerte que todo.
La mémoire du monde. J'appartiendrai à la mémoire du monde si le chant seul achève l'âme. Et je sais les pierres de mer comme regard d'Alizé sur les longs sirocots de nos jours. Mais les voitures ont toujours les roulements au pied des colombes. Et j'ai peur. Les princes oubliés dans la vanité de tambours parmi les louanges, et les femmes à saveur de fraises, et le peuple dévore la pierre, et les villages orlot fermés les villes. Parmi l'ordre sauvage des errances, l'espoir cancéreux, les amitiés abuseuses, et la quête habitée jusqu'à la ruine acceptée des pas. Les oiseaux de cœur ont migré la pleine lune, et j'agrène la caresse finie, la joie finie, la flûte finie. De beaux jours d'avant la nuit, l'aide de tempête, et malgré les poids et les prix de l'amour entier que je porte, je n'ai nulle part où le partager. J'aime parmi l'absence de l'amour, je ris parmi l'absence de rire, et partout les fraternités sont chauves, et je flirte des cœurs des gamins, parmi l'âge de voyager. Le fouet de solitude ardent, la chute de rêve, seul parmi la roche effrayée, la fête de pêche, parmi l'arachide rebelle, parmi les milles rebelles, les cotons rebelles, seul avec les rondelles offensées, la larme dans l'ombre, la faim dans le silence, la misère ferrée au devant des jours d'asphalte, le soir dans la tête, seul parmi l'amour en père, la rupture de tendresse, les brûlis de caresses, seul parmi l'enfant délaissé, les désirs mutilés, le désespoir porté comme une croix, seul parmi les regards abaissés, parmi les toiles faussées, la fraude traîtresse, la méro brisée, les courriers effrayés, seul parmi les bouquets févriers, les écueils cloutés, les fenêtres fermées, les portes fermées, les rues fermées, les paradis déménagés et les paix ménopause, seul avec quelques pattes, seul pourtant, des pans droits, des mains fraternelles, des ruines douces, des regards frissonnants.
Cruel desire. I know about the men, shout out the dream of aging. Although my hands can find again the burning sweetness in the ashes, I have the cruel desire, the sharp passion, and the new caresses. But I cut the congealed blood of a lark, and I know my sky without any drill edge, where I celebrate the foam right, moan without hate, unleash ecstasy, open love, release the blast of ember and trade wind, later maybe. For this trip chosen, I kneel delights in the mouth of the singing, since I have tenderness to stab. Where corrupt love sponsors so many deaths, and after dawn I march, nourished in the anger of the bonfires. But only flames do inhabit me. I save afternoons of escape under the wings of seagulls. Love can keep your doors opened. When I preserve a land of forgiveness, then, by silk hugs, the snake may become nightingale, the midday girl deflowered without hate, loved without hate, chewed without hate. Frigate raised in the broken station of the serenades, and then I fall decapitated to the wide district of enjoyments. Boiling flesh, brutal kidney, fragile knees, galloping blood, defeated mouth, the vertigo, the assumed fall, and anew the new sun, the new mouth, the new meat, and love proclaimed, sung, shouted.
Muchas gracias a las 9 que habéis leído. Gracias, muchísimas. Y bueno, esto es una película muda, como Europa.
Thank you to the readers, and this is a silent film like Europe.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Radical Film Network Conference 2024 here in Madrid, Archives of Radical Cinema. We're going to be really brief with this because there's a lot of things going on today. We have to get out of this room by 6:30 or something like that, so we don't have so much time, and there's lots of things. So we are really happy to have you here, and we've been working like hell for for the last year, and well, I just can't imagine when I spoke to Steve like 2 years ago, maybe more or less 2 years ago, and I couldn't thought that this was finally going to happen. So yeah, we're very happy. So thank you. So I won't make you miss more time, and I'm going to pass my word to Alejandro, that is going to tell you some really important things about how the conference is going to proceed, because we have lots of venues and some things that you need to know in advance, and it's some practical information in a way, but I think it's important. And then I'll pass the word to Concha. So I think in 10 minutes tops we're over, and then we can start with Steve and Matthias. That's what we all want to hear. So thank you.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm just gonna provide you some practical information. And anyway, I'm gonna be really short, so if there's something you miss or you don't quite get from what I say, of course, just come to us and ask us about it. But anyway, well, all of you are registered, but anyway, we'll keep the registration place on Thursday and Friday in La Corrala, which is going to be the main venue for the panels and the project presentations. So there is, all the venues are at a relatively close distance, so they are not very far. La Corrala is maybe 10, 15 minutes from here, so it's really close. One thing we have to emphasize is that please try to set your presentation for 15 minutes, because I mean, I think we have a great program of panels and projects and so on, but I mean, we have to, everything is really packed, so we have to be really strict about it. So just to remind you that. And try to be in your room like 10 minutes prior to your presentation, so we can set everything for it. There'll be one person in every room to help you with that. So either us or then our collaborators and so on, the volunteers. So. Those of you that haven't uploaded your materials to the folder, to the shared folder, please do. So we have all the material in the folder, and we can project, we can screen from that, we can project from that. What else? Yeah, the tickets to the screenings on today and tomorrow. For Bellas Artes today and Cineteca tomorrow. I think most of you have been getting tickets for that at the time you register. Those tickets are for the people that are participating in the conference, so that have a presentation and so on. But if there are free tickets and you are coming as an auditor, just ask us later on to see if there are free tickets available for you. And those of you that got a ticket or that are thinking about getting a ticket, but you see you're not going to have time to come to the screening or something, please return the ticket so that it's available for someone else. For the screening in Reina Sofia and the screening in here on Saturday, of course you don't need tickets, so it's only for today and tomorrow. The rooms in La Corrala, for those of you that have never been to it, there are 3 rooms. There's a big hall for about 100 people, right? And then there are 2 rooms for 30 people. For that, considering the amount of people that there will be in the conference, the preference will be for those that have been that are either that are presenting and for those that inscribed beforehand. We'll have some catering on Thursday and Friday in La Corrala. So it will be available, it will be served in the entrance hall, right in front of the big conference room. I mean, you'll get used to it when you get there. And on Saturday, we'll have that in Tres Peces Tres, which is this cultural center. And you have to, price is up to you. So it says solidarity prize, but please be solidarious. And otherwise, as for transportation, most of venues, as I said, are really close to each other. So some of them, I mean, Cineteca and La Corrala are a little bit, maybe 30 minutes walk or something like that. And there is metro straight from one spot to the other. But most likely there will be groups of people walking from one venue to the other. So just ask us, most likely us will be walking there. So if you want to just walk, just let us know and we can all walk together. I think that's it for it. Okay? Thank you.
If you don't remember any of these things, don't worry. We will be here. We will stay here to answer your questions. Well, so, a bit of poetry for this afternoon. I would like to present you the spirit of this first session. So, nothing, or everything, probably. Everything happened because something has happened before. So, we are history, we are sons and daughters of the history, and so the Radical Film Network. So something happened in the past that make it possible that today we will be here. So what happened in the past that make a group of people to put or to set up the Radical Film Network? Something happened. They were filmmakers, academic, activists. The first presentation this afternoon is going to deal with this. But we are not only history, we are also archives. We all are archives, biological, neurological, or emotional, or probably political or legal, or each person is a living archive. So the second presentation this afternoon is a kind of a workshop debating who is going to expose or to share with us how Radical Film Network is building an archive. So these are the first presentation we are going to have. But there is another very important thing that constitutes the Radical Film Network is the experience, because Radical Film Network is living experiences. So we had organized the program. You can check the website and you can find a lot of information there, and reports and organizations and a directory. But the most important is the living experience. You are the one who have to do the living experience. So we have made the program. Now you have to build up the experience. We hope you will enjoy doing it. And viva Palestina libre.
So, Steve and Matthias, it's all yours. We're going to arrange the stage in a couple of minutes, and then we will start.
Thank you. Hi. Oh yeah, it works. Hi. Welcome everyone. My name is Matthias Kispert. This is Steve Presence. We're both the admin bots and co-conveners of the Radical Film Network. So it's great to see everyone here in person again after 2 years, after the amazing conference in Genoa. And we've had a great round of applause already, but I still want to extend our thanks again to the amazing organizers here. Miguel Arrazu, Concha Mateus, and Alejandro Pedregal. I hope I pronounced that sort of okay. And also all the volunteers involved in making this happen. Really looking forward to the next few days. So basically, we have a presentation that's kind of in two parts. Part one is focused on Steve and his knowledge of the whole history of radical film in the UK, the IFA, the Independent Filmmakers Association, which was a sort of precursor in a way to the Radical Film Network. And then in part two, we're going to look more at the present, at what we're doing now. We will also introduce our brand new website, which has gone online today. And through that kind of, discuss some of the different aspects of how the network works, what we do. Yeah, I guess we have to get started. Over to you.
Cool. Right. Great. Thanks. Hi, everybody. So yeah, as Matthias is saying, this is sort of in two parts. So this is part one, and then that's part two. So part one then. So, so the Independent Filmmakers Association. So the IFA ran from 1974 to 1990, and it really sort of represented kind of politically engaged, progressive and experimental film culture in the 1970s and 80s, and it really inspired the formation of the RFN. And so when the call came out for Archives of Radical Film, I was like, oh, great, okay, this is my chance to try and talk about the IFA and draw some attention to the IFA and talk a little bit about the role that it played in forming the Radical Film Network. And so myself and some others were involved in reading around radical film culture in this period in the 70s and 80s in Britain. And so the network started in 2013, and when we were thinking about this stuff in around 2012, it's like, why haven't we got an organization like this at the moment? There is a real need for an organization like the IFA. So RFN is obviously very different, and I'll say a bit about why. So I could talk about the IFA for hours. I'm just going to try and say four things. So one is a little bit about context. I'm going to talk a bit about this idea called a symbolic cut, or a kind of anchoring concept, which comes from organizational studies. I'll explain what that is, just that idea around which organizations sort of center themselves. I want to say a little bit about integrated practice, and then also about funding at the end. So I'm going to try and talk for about 15 minutes, but there's tons to say about the IFA and what we can learn from it. This isn't everything, it's just a snippet. And I'm going to say it's slightly awkward talking about the IFA in that there are people who were involved in the IFA. I wasn't. Most of this happened before I was born. But there are people in the audience like Rod and Jill who were actually part of the IFA. But most of what I know about this organization is through reading about it, talking to people like Rod and Jill and interviewing people, and also consulting the archive. So there's a lot of IFA documents in an archive at Sheffield Hallam University, and I'm going to try and draw attention to those as I go. Like this gorgeous letter, typewritten on the 4th of March, 1975, from Mike Leggett, who is one of the organizers, who almost as soon after the IFA was formed is writing to the British Film Institute to say, give us some money, which the IFA actually didn't get any funding from the BFI for another 5 years, but it's indicative of the organization that straight away they were asking for money. So anyway, so context then. So according to one of the national organisers of the IFA, Simon Blanchard, he said, the IFA is only conceivable if you understand that it sat within the wider context of post-1960s cultural ferment and the much broader social, trade union, political agitation and upheaval at that time. So he's writing in, so this is 1974, so the events of Paris in 1968, barricades on the streets is sort of a recent memory. Ruling class in France, thinking there might be a revolutionary situation there. Anti-imperialist movements are underway all over the world. the Vietnam War, women's liberation movement. So this really is a time of kind of a lot of kind of radical activity. And also in the UK at this point, faith in social democratic structures and institutions is fairly high. So we have between 70 and 80% voter turnout in the 4 general elections in the UK in the 70s. We won't have anything like that this month in a couple of weeks when we all vote. There is 13.2 million people in trade unions in the UK at this point. It's nothing like that at the moment. That is the height of the trade union movement in the UK. And there are 250,000 members of the Labour Party. It's something like 400,000 now. It dropped from 560,000 when Jeremy Corbyn was in power, or was leading the party. So, and I think this also helps us understand the organisational structure that the IFA adopted, which was quite sort of transparently hierarchical. So there was a national executive of elected members and regional branches around the UK. As I say, RFN obviously very different from that. In terms of the film and TV context of the time, this is also a period of like dramatic change. So there is increasing access to film education and also filmmaking, but also exhibition technology. So degree courses in film studies start in this period in the late 60s. And there is also a lot of kind of, really furiously intense debates about cinema ideology, the sort of ideological implications of the sort of apparatus of cinema, this idea of an audience with a projector behind them and a big screen. Debates about the politics of form, the relationship between theory and practice, and so on and so on and so on. So that all feeds into this. The film industry in the UK is in crisis in this period as well. Hollywood, the British film industry basically leeches off of Hollywood money. And in this period, as now, Hollywood withdrew its finance, was in crisis, some series of big budget flops, and therefore our industry was in crisis as well. There were calls for nationalisation. The government had set up something called the British Film Authority to think about restructuring the whole industry. And there is also the 4th television channel on the horizon, so we know that there is going to be a 4th television channel. It's like looking at another world, thinking about the IFA. So that's the context. And so from this kind of political and sort of film context emerges all these exciting organizations. So this is just a handful of them. So Cinema Action, so obviously some of them predate the IFA. So Cinema Action was a kind of militant, trade unionist-oriented, what we would think of as video activism today. Berwick Street Collective split from them to make more kind of aesthetically innovative films. The London Women's Film Group made amazing films. The Amazing Equal Pay Show is one of theirs, brilliant, sort of experimental film. But they're not just in London, in Sheffield, in Wales, Birmingham, and so on and so on. So these sorts of grow. And these were the organisations that the IFA sort of in part represented. Okay. So about this idea of a symbolic cut then. So this is a concept from organisational studies. And all it means is like the sort of boundary-making processes through which organisations try and define themselves and attract membership and sort of like form an identity. And the IFA obviously organised around this idea of independence. And the way they defined that was as independent from big capital on the one hand, so sort of economic independence, but also aesthetic or artistic and political independence in that they were sort of, they recognized the artistic and political delimitation that big capital tends to impose. But they also understood from the outset that this notion, that one of the interesting things about symbolic cuts, or you can think of them as like anchoring sort of concepts or ideas, is that they're subject to debate and exchange. And then obviously the meaning of independence changes. And so Duncan Reiki, I don't know if he's in the audience yet, but he's speaking at the conference, writing about this a bit later on in his book, Subversion. He said like by the 90s, to be an independent filmmaker was no longer an act of conscious political autonomy or radical opposition. It was to be a freelancer in the deregulated media industry. Okay, So obviously for us, and you can see this in the archive, so they talk about this. So here, the struggle for independent filmmakers entails not only a fight for their films, but also a fight for their idea of what an independent cinema could become. So this idea of understanding that things change and that also this idea of independence as a relational term. So independent is a term used extensively to lend an assumed dignity to a host of activities which by their very nature can only be dependent. And so they're very conscious of this. Also, you see later on down here, you can see the sort of Marxist orientation of the IFA. They start using an example of someone who has an independent income, in that they're independently wealthy, they don't work for a living, and they start saying about how actually there's a dependent relations because they're like parasites on the people that do work, and so this kind of thing. Okay, so for us though, just briefly, to come away from the IFA and think about the RFN, obviously we have organized around this notion of radicalism, which also is a double-edged sword in that, there are advantages and disadvantages to using this concept. But just to draw attention to some of the ways in which I think it's useful, and also some of the ideas that were discussed when we set the network up in 2013. So firstly, it's provocative, but also ambiguous. So it begs the question, what is radical film? I think usefully also, it can encompass both the sort of political and the aesthetic avant-garde, which is something that the IFA really managed to do effectively. So we were sort of definitely taking a lesson from them there. Also, I think it signifies our orientation towards a progressive politics, but it doesn't align to a specific tradition or philosophy of anarchism or autonomism or socialism or social democracy or whatever. It's appropriate etymologically in that it comes from the Latin for root, so it evokes that idea of coming from the grassroots. And probably, certainly last but not least, is this idea that radicalism can be used to think through a range of different practices, so not just production, but also distribution, exhibition, and the kind of modes of organizing that are involved in this culture. And that is definitely a way in which we were trying to learn from the IFA and what they called integrated practice, which basically is a way of thinking about cinema as not just composed of production and filmmakers, although obviously that's a vital part of the culture, but also it's about distribution and exhibition, and understanding that if you want to build a film culture, then you really need to understand and work across all three parts of that sort of value chain, if you like. So you find this in the way that they define themselves. So this is from documents taken from the first IFA conference. So they say, when the IFA was formed, it consisted not only of filmmakers, but also critics, educationalists, distribution and exhibition workers. In short, all those engaged in developing an independent cinema. And they talk about all those engaged in developing film meanings later on in other documents, which I think is really important and something that we all sort of bear in mind as we go about our work. Okay, yes, so this is also another way of sort of articulating that idea of integrated practice. It's taken from a paper by Claire Johnston, who's passed away now, but is a filmmaker and theorist at this time, and she described it like this. Such a relationship of production, distribution, and exhibition would aim at creating a situation in which the act of viewing and the act of filming become two moments of equal value, neither having priority over the other. A process of meaning production involving viewer and filmmaker in a dialectical relationship. And then goes on, as I say, is quite theoretically minded, and goes on to cite Colin McCabe, who then cites Bertolt Brecht and others. But the other thing that I really love about this snippet is that down here, they quote from the Progressive Film Institute in the 30s. So the work of Kino and the Progressive Film Institute in the 1930s stands as a pioneering achievement in this respect. And I think that's one of the really lovely things about the IFA is that, and this is where the sort of title of this paper comes from, which is The Wreckage of History, trying to think about, people may be familiar with Walter Benjamin's essay on Paul Klee's painting, The Angel of History, which is basically the painting of this angel sort of blowing backwards, Benjamin describes it, into the future, looking down at sort of like the wreckage of history before him. And I sort of like to think about that in terms of the people in the 70s. They were looking back at the 30s and rediscovering the workers' films of the 30s and the 20s even. And also I think like more scholars of my generation are sort of doing the same thing. We're kind of moving into the future, but we're looking back at the past and looking at everything that the people involved in the IFA in the 70s and 80s and now in the 90s were doing and thinking, wow, that's amazing, and trying to learn from what they were doing. Yes, okay, so that's integrated practice. Okay, and then just finally on funding. So I'm going to say a few words about funding and then I'll try and draw some conclusions. So one of the things looking at the history of the IFA that is just unbelievable is how much money they managed to gather or extract from the state, really. And as I say, they set about doing that straight away. From the off, we're like at the BFI saying, we're here, give us some money, we're important. And so, you know, from 1977, just 3 years after the IFA was formed, they were regional branches of the IFA were getting funding. So that, I think the Middlesbrough Council, I think, got a grant of £2,500, just one of the branches of the IFA. A feminist distributor called Circles, for example, was getting annual grants of between £25,000 to £30,000. And then by 1984, which Channel 4 had become a thing, Channel 4 started in 1982, and actually largely because of the IFA's lobbying, there was a dedicated department in Channel 4 called the Independent Film and Video Department that was commissioning work from this film culture, and Rod was one of the deputy sort of commissioning editors in that department and was involved in that. So by 1984, they'd spent £3.4 million commissioning work from independent film culture for a famous slot called the 11th Hour, but there was radical work all over Channel 4 at that period. And then the workshops, which I haven't got much time to talk about what the workshops were, but just in short, the workshop agreement was this unbelievable agreement between the British Film Institute, Channel 4, the ACTT, which was the workers' union, that's a film workers' union, and it basically created these workshops where for non-commercial film and television production, where the people involved would get paid wages for that work, and Channel 4 had a first look deal to broadcast any of the work that was produced. Unbelievable. Like, it's like looking at another world when you read about this stuff. And Rod will be talking about the Derry Collective, right? Derry Film on Friday, I believe that is. So do go to that. So yes, so as Margaret Dickinson says, another filmmaker scholar who isn't here at this conference but who is involved in the network and was involved in the IFA, she says in this brilliant book, by 1984, many IFA activists were working for or funded by the new Channel 4. Filmmakers who previously had circulated their work to audiences of tens or hundreds were now addressing hundreds of thousands and occasionally millions. It was a victory, and indeed it was. However, it was fairly short-lived in the sense that the funding, just a few years after, so the IFA shut down in 1990, so just 6 years after that. And that was because the funding tide, Margaret Thatcher gets into power in 1979, it's the early 80s before she really sort of turns her gaze like Sauron to the film and TV industry and starts to withdraw that funding. And the funding tide goes out, and that really cripples the culture, and it sort of falls away. As I say, this is abridged. There's obviously a lot to say about this. But okay, so what can we learn then? So, well, a lot more than what I can say here. But this is the Paul Klee painting, by the way. That's the angel of history, as Benjamin sees it, sort of blowing backwards into the future, looking at, and there's a storm stuck in the angel's wing, so it can't turn towards the future, but it can look back at the past. So one of the things that I would take from that is that funding is actually quite dangerous. And I want to draw attention to this point because actually with our new website that we'll talk about in a minute, we are starting to try and think about how the RFN can pull money into the organization, because the RFN is so big now that we really need money to run it properly and effectively and do things properly. So the IFA had a major impact on British film culture, but it was wiped out because it became dependent on that funding. And so that's really the risk. And so as Alan Fountain said, he was the commissioning editor at the Independent Film and Video Department at Channel 4, it's an understatement. Funding changes things. But he also comes from the IFA as well. All right, so secondly, I've got three. So different contexts, very wildly, unbelievably different contexts. But actually, the fundamental questions are similar. So, what is radical or independent film or film culture? How can we organize to support it? Should we oppose or seek support from the mainstream institutions, film, TV, and so on? And how should we relate to one another? How can we best communicate and support one another to do whatever it is that we do in making meaning, as the IFA would put it? Okay, and then finally, obviously the context is key, but it's not determinant. So we make, a bit like Concha was saying in the opening there, so I think, we make our own history. It's the people that really matter. And I think when you do a lot of work thinking about organizations and organizational studies and organizational structures, you can lose sight of, actually, it's like the people that are involved that really make it. And so contexts are important, so it's hard to imagine the RFN striking a deal with a TV channel to get wages for the kind of work that people in radical film culture make. But it's not out of the question either. If we want to talk about that, we should do that. But it's people that make the history. But as Marx put it in a spectacularly unquotable passage, where he's writing, he's saying people make their own history, but they inherit the histories from their grandfathers, like horror, dreams, and their nightmares comes to haunt them. But what he's saying is, we make our own history, but not in conditions of our own making. And so I think we should bear this in mind as we go into the next 10 years of the Radical Film Network's future, and we think, hopefully, across this conference and at the end of the steering group meeting, where everybody's open meeting, where we should all come and think about what we want to do as a network and what we want this network to become and where we want it to go. I think that's it for me. So yeah, great. All right, thanks. 20 minutes. All right,
Okay. Great, thanks. So it's really interesting, I think, to reflect on the past, the history of radical film cultures, and the continuities and also discontinuities between what's happening today and how the Radical Film Network is working. Issues such as integrated practice, obviously is still very relevant. Sort of conflicted relationship to the mainstream. On the other hand, we're organized very, very differently. No one gets paid here. We basically depend on our academic jobs to sort of finance the time that we spend on keeping the Radical Film Network running. But anyway, without further ado, this is our new website. Yes. First of all, I wanted to say thanks to everyone who was involved in making this happen. Besides, Steve, that includes a number of volunteers who's, just sort of appeared after we posted to the mailing list. So that's Laura Ager, did I say that right? Yeah. Christian Birch, Jerome Esteban, who's also volunteering for the conference here, and Daniela Liberati, and also our amazing graphic designers. We've got Eloisa Aitken, who has designed the program, actually, the amazing program. And Eloisa, are you here? Somewhere, yeah. Hey. And Mia Matthews, who's helped with, t-shirts actually, that are not ready yet, but soon. So this is our homepage. We have like this new 3-word tagline. It's open for discussion. I think you came up with that, right, Steve? I think it works. We have like images, and then a bunch of sections. And in a way, the sections on the website are, in a way, the structure of the network. Like, the network is just kind of the website and us connecting through it and organizing events like this. So let's start with the directory. If it's loading. Okay, there we go. I think the numbers might not be correct. We have to actually update them manually. So the directory is a directory of groups and organizations engaged in radical film film culture in various ways across the world. So we've got a couple of categories here, and basically, yeah, like we used to have a directory already on the old website, but it's got more search functions and categories to look to help you find things. Also, I want to say that if anyone is part of any organization or group or knows of any organization or group that should be on there, get them to get in touch with us. And it doesn't take very long to create a profile. And there's always like the contact page, yeah. Contact. So yeah, if you send an email to info@radicalfilmnetwork.com or use the form here, basically Steve and I get the email and then we figure out what to do with it. Okay, the next section is films. And that's already something that's been started on the previous website as well. Again, thanks go out here to our film library admins, and they are Mike Dunford, Ruben Irving, and Clive Meyer. I think none of them is here at the moment. So again, this is open to anyone to submit their films, and we now have like a page where you can submit your film. One thing I have to say is, like, if you make a mistake, you can't change it once you've submitted the form, so you'll have to email us and we'll fix it for you. But yeah, we're trying to build up, a library of the work of our members, contributors, people associated with the network, that can then also become a research resource, right? So it becomes an archive of, contemporary radical film practices in all their varieties. And yeah, anything else about the directory? Films, okay. Conferences. Now this is what we're doing right now. So yeah, we've got pages for our conferences. Maybe at this point I should also mention, like, we need people who want to organize more conferences in other great places, because it does always depend on local teams taking on the responsibility. So if you fancy doing that, let us know. Support us. Yeah, so this is like basically, as I said, all the work happens kind of voluntarily, but we had to, Steve managed to raise some money for his university to pay for the web designers, because that wasn't cheap. And there are probably some things that we would still like them to do, but we've run out of budget. There's also things like supporting people's travel costs for conferences, also supporting carbon, not carbon free, but carbon less travel, how do you say, low carbon travel. And oh yeah, so we've got like an account on a website called Open Collective. You maybe know more about this, how this works.
Oh, yeah, I can say a little bit about the Open Collective. I won't click on that because it takes off and I probably won't be able to find my way back. Although you will. But this is my computer. Yeah, so we're managing our finances through Open Collective, which is a way of being super transparent so that everybody can see where the money that comes into the network comes from. You can be anonymous, or you can be, like, I put a tenner in just to check if it was working, so I'm one of the people on there. Actually, maybe I will just quickly show you. Hopefully it works. Yes, okay, great, that's easy. So this is our Radical Film Network Open Collective page. You can donate from different levels. So just a custom is the Workers' Film and Photo League. So we're trying to reference our history there, and you can do as much or as little as you want. Or for £2 a month, we've called it the Zhigovertov. The Agnes Varda is £24 a month. The Usmans and Bene is £50. And then the Vera Chaitalova for £100, I think that's a one-off. And then if there's any socialist capitalists out there, then you can do a one-off £1,000 donate. I don't think we'll get many of them, but you never know, right? It would be really cool if, if we all pay £2 a month. That's amazing, isn't it? Then we can pay for people to come to the next conference. We can do whatever we decide we want to do. But the point is that you can see where the money comes from. So there's my £10, and so on. And we've got a bit more than this. Oh yeah, so someone's already done a £20 donation. And there's a 50. Yeah, so you can see how it works. I'll just jump back. But the idea is that we want to try and be as super transparent about this as we can, as we try and introduce money into the network. Okay, is there anything else to say about reading list?
Yeah, so the reading list is a new thing, and we've actually copied and pasted that from Chris Jury, right? Chris Robet. Oh yeah, that's it. Sorry. So yeah, this is. Oh yeah, there you go. So first of all, we got two books here that are specifically connected to the Radical Film Network, and there's the Radical Film Network Berlin, two of which are here. Have published this amazing book. When was it? Last year, right? And this contemporary radical film culture, co-edited by Steve. And then here is basically a whole bibliography of different interesting sources. We've just kind of taken that over from Chris Jury's bibliography. It would actually be good if someone would want to volunteer to kind of try and keep that up to date. And yeah, just work on that. It's not too much work, just sort of go through it, add stuff, work on the formatting. Statements, yeah. So statements, that was a bit of a sort of, sometimes decisions get made sort of, as and when things arise. So we have received some emails to the info@Radical Film Network email asking for, to statements of support for particular filmmakers who are at risk of political persecution. And in the end, we discussed with the steering group and posted also to the mailing list, I think, and we basically, drafted these statements and then published them on the website. So one is in solidarity with Kurdish women activists, and another one with two Iranian filmmakers. And that's the only request that have come in so far. That's why that's the only statements so far. And now the steering group. So this is where where the question of sort of organization comes up, and that's very interesting to think about again how that relates to the IFA, which was very much I guess people had proper jobs there, right? They were employed as directors and that sort of thing. We have a much more horizontal structure, but it's not completely horizontal, right? I guess many of you are aware of Joe Freeman's 1970 article, "The Tyranny of Structurelessness," which is sort of critical of the idea of completely horizontal groups potentially ignoring the question how that power is still distributed in some way or other. So we are always very conscious of like how we organize this, and we, in our role as conveners, we try to make only operational decisions and leave the big decisions to the wider group to decide. So we first of all consult the wider steering group, and then also if needed, post to the mailing list and have a discussion there with people. Because at the end of the day, membership of the Radical Film Network is like, if you're on the mailing list, you're basically part of it. So you have a voice there to contribute. So yeah, we have like a steering group at the moment, and we actually, that's been going for a while, and we want to sort of refresh it. Yeah, so that's also something we can discuss at the AGM later in the conference. Yeah. And the mailing list, I guess, which you all know. Yeah, but if you're not on the mailing list, sign up to the mailing list. You can post your announcements there. And yeah, if you're on the mailing list, you're kind of part of the network, basically. So yeah, I guess that's it from us. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, if there's any questions or anything or comments, or Rose and Jill want to tell me that actually the IFA wasn't like that.
The obvious thing for me in the context of this conference is that you are talking about filmmakers, activists, but you're not talking about archivists. And the production, exhibition, circulation, and how do you relate with that? Maybe this is a place to think about how archives comes into the Radical Film Network.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, we haven't got that many archives, I don't think, in the directory of organisations, but definitely my immediate thought is that if there are archives, have we got archives in the directory? I don't know how we would find them, because we haven't. You're right, archives isn't a category. God, I trust you to ask that. Can you have got in touch with that? Well, maybe we would have put them as distributors. Let's see. Christie Books is a sort of an archive. Mosrine is archive of the Egyptian Revolution. Lux is sort of an archive of experimental, London Film and Video Community Archive. But yeah, I think it would be really cool to try and to think about how to bring more archives in and how to kind of activate the archive in for the RFN. But yeah, do you have anything you would want to add to that?
I mean, there's also the question of like archive contents, right? Getting access to archives, but we have a very limited infrastructure. So there could be like a subsection, but that would require us raising additional funding, I think, to work towards that.
Yeah, Rod.
I'd just say that I think your sketch of history is pretty damn accurate. I mean, obviously, a thing like the IFA had so many different elements that there are different perspectives about what it was and what it did. And for organizations, you could put in the London Filmmakers Co-op that Mike Leggett was a leading light in, because it, and then London Video Arts, was a funded experimental element in it all. But I just say, in terms of the interconnection and liaison and communication, and in terms of archives, the big difference is the digital. That obviously the IFA in some ways was, as you were saying, a victim of its own success. The effect of funding perhaps, and the fact that production suddenly was, it was distorted because it suddenly got adequate funding for a lot of the people involved to make things and distribute them via television. But this new version of things changes through the digital, and indeed the history and memory, as you said, and it's good to see Kula Vampa on the front page, but history and memory goes on further in the way that images can be accessed in the public sphere, and filmmakers, there was an issue about how we're going to screen Mother Island. Well, in fact, Mother Island is on YouTube, and there's a good range of work that can be found publicly, and that's together with your use of the digital to communicate all the time, that's absolutely a different situation. Although the last point I make is coming here to Madrid, and thank you for that, is the analog about actually being in one place at one time, and what you can do that's different in terms of solidarity and support by meeting up and everything, which is another dimension as well. But thank you all for that.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Rod. Yeah. Not so much. There was a contribution, right? There wasn't questions for anyone. Any comments, questions? Is everyone on the mailing list in here? Hands up if you're on the mailing list. Hopefully that's most of you, but I bet you it's not everybody. Yeah, it's not. Okay, that's like probably less than half. So please join the mailing list, and then basically you are then in the network. We don't keep membership lists or whatever. There's nearly 1,000 people on it now, and that is like the main way that the network sort of communicates to itself. Yeah, I think we're done. Great. Thank you very much. All right, let's have a good conference.
Thank you so much, guys. Just a quick 2 words. We're gonna make a 5-minute stop. We're gonna arrange some desks here, and we have still some tickets for tonight screenings left. So if you haven't take one of them because you were not a participant, whatever, you can take one. Okay? We have plenty of them. And just 5 minutes, please, because we have to keep going.
It's easier than
I think we should start. Should we try again? Yes. Okay, I think we need to get started with the workshop so we don't get kicked out before we've done everything we wanted to do. So if you could please sit down and we can get started. Thank you.
Okay.
You always only listen to men, don't you? Let's be aware of this. You're going to do it without mic then?
I'm going to try it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm going to use a microphone because I don't want to have to shout. Okay, so actually, speaking of intergenerational solidarity, when I'm Elena, I was the organizer, one of the organizers of Genova 2022, and you were one of the first people that I came to, so we actually enacted intergenerational solidarity in the organization of the RFN conferences, and I think this is something that's probably going to continue. But right, so I'm not going to tell you how difficult it was or how great it was. You can ask me or all the people that were there with us over drinks later, perhaps. But one thing I want to talk about is, well, first of all, it's obvious that it was difficult. The first part of our workshop description is very autobiographical. You know, what we're doing is so hard when we organize things like that, that the last thing on our mind is, how are we going to archive it? What are we going to do? So actually, the intergenerational solidarity, there's one piece that we missed. We didn't plan any archiving whatsoever, any documenting, none of that. But somehow it happened spontaneously because people were participating in a way that I was hoping to encourage, try to encourage by setting up the event in a certain way. And it worked. It worked fantastically. So it was a one-off event. I'm not going to do it again, so don't ask. And it just kind of happened in a way that I could describe as spontaneous, collective, definitely collective, perhaps accidental, and maybe organic. I don't know, all of these adjectives I think are good for to talk about that. But so in a way we were the lucky fools, the ones who didn't really plan on having an archive, but somehow got it. I don't think I'm alone. I think we have archived accidentally and maybe unintentionally other people's stuff in radical film culture. We've had the things that we've done ourselves archived by others, perhaps. So let's maybe ask ourselves this question later when we open up to sort of a debate. One thing that we did that was actually really good for that was having workshops that were more practical. So some of the people who ran those workshops are actually here. So you'll be happy to see that I brought your fantastic fanzines that, wait, I don't know if I can do that with one hand, were made exactly. You be my assistant, exactly. So a workshop had as one of its objectives the production of fanzines to document the conference. I brought two. They gave me two as a gift, and I've kept those in my little bag with RFN stuff. That was also something that brought people together, doing stuff and coming up with ways of narrating their own experience of what that event was. And the other one was another workshop of which, unfortunately, we don't have much material because Sean is not here, but he ran two workshops that were based on, were aimed at teaching people how to make and edit films on small devices like mobile phones and tablets. And this morning, in typically last-minute fashion, I emailed Sean, who always answers instantly, and he said, no, I have absolutely no idea what happened to those films. He had two workshops, pretty long ones, where people planned and then filmed something with their phones. And we have absolutely no idea what happened to that material. So that is one instance in which it didn't work, because we actually didn't keep in touch with those people or have any records of who they were. So that's one bad example of how this didn't quite happen spontaneously. But there was a lot of stuff that came up, pictures, and also experiences. And that is one thing that I was kind of encouraged to do with two of the other organizers who are not here. One was Sean, and the other one is Laura, who's already mentioned, Laura Eger, who unfortunately couldn't come here this time. And after the whole thing ended and the dust settled, she said, why don't we, sorry, I have slides that I'm not actually showing. It was an unconference, kind of, building on the experience of Glasgow in 2016, and it was also a festival. We had lots of screenings, and Laura was very eager to participate, also because she had been sort of stopped from doing that work that she likes so much, and so she got involved in planning the festival with us, and we did screenings in situations that were quite bizarre, including having a small car that had a whole cinema inside it that could just, unpack and make it work, called Cinepanda. They were from Marseille in the south of France, and they drove all the way to Genova with that ridiculous car and unpacked a cinema out of it, which looked like that. If you look at the picture on the left, that's what it looked like. And we actually screened a film that Sean had made 21 years before in Genova, where he started his career as a video activist in 2001 during the G8 protests. And these are the kinds of things that we did. We did them in squares without authorization, without, we put, you can probably see that thing here, we put drapes, things that are tailor-made over the lights to dim them so that we could actually watch a film in the dark. And we had a debate, we invited people, and we did this every single night. It was quite a bit grueling for us, but fantastic at the same time. And back to what I was saying before, Laura was the one who convinced us, and I must admit that Sean and I were a little bit reluctant. We're like, nah, I don't want to read an article. Nah, none of that academic stuff anymore. But we did it, and it was great. And we came up with this title, A Machine with Many Legs, which I think is fantastic because it really describes what organizing that conference was after it started. So when I was talking to the organizers here, who I would also like to thank you all for putting together this fantastic event, and now it's started. It's going to start walking on its own. You've already seen that, right? Because it is a machine with many legs, and each one of us are one of those legs, and that's what happened in Genova, basically. We actually wrote this in the context, what happened? I didn't touch anything. Okay, maybe I did. So it's now pink. Please stop doing that. Okay, I'm not going to breathe anymore. I'm going to be far from it. Okay, so we wrote this as a kind of way of documenting our own experience, in a way, of documenting what it was like to do all that work for something that we could define as communal luxury. So that was the theme of this special issue of Making and Breaking. So if you want to read the article, you just Google A Machine with Many Legs, Ager, A-G-E-R, and you'll find it. Sorry, I don't have a link. But we talked about the fact that all of this sort of worked together. And I'm saying this for a reason, because I'm thinking that this is an approach that we should perhaps extend to our archiving practices, right? So it's not just the responsibility of Miguel, Concha, and Alejandro, and all the people who are here this week to participate in this conference, to make the memories of this event. We are all going to do it together. I think it's probably the best way to go about it. And this is what happened here. People were taking pictures, people were producing material, people were sort of remembering what happened, and there are some of our own impressions from that. So I'll start in order. So the first one is the explanation of a machine that runs with many legs. So this is something that in organized squats, which were a major part of the organization of Genova 2022, there were two of them that were closely involved, LSOA Burida, which is now going to be evicted, unfortunately, and I think we should talk about doing something about this in the AGM. And the other one is Out 357, of which I'm part. And in these places, doing stuff together feels natural. It just happens, but it's not natural. It is a cultural thing. It's part of the culture of what we call self-management, autogestione in Italian. I think it's autogestione in Spanish, isn't it? That stuff that comes from autonomous structures and horizontal structures. And that's how squats are run. That's how they continue to go on. Everyone does their bit, everything comes together, and that is a form of what we would call communal luxury, and that's how it's built. And that's what we mean when we say a machine that runs with many legs, okay? And to make this communal luxury, we also have to do another thing. We have to break individualization, which actually is something that all of us who were involved, felt a lot in the context of organizing this event within the university. Inside the university, with money from the university. So I'm kind of, linking with what Steve was saying about funding. Funding is not necessarily good. funding can also be evil. And with funding come, responsibilities, obligations, and all sorts of things that we may or may not want. And I think we really need to think about that. But the atmosphere there was, everybody's doing their own thing to progress in their own little career or aims or objectives, whereas when we moved into the squats to do the same stuff, basically, it all changed. I'm pretty sure that all those of you who were there felt that. And I think it's something that we need to try to bring, to bring with us outside these places and spread it. And in a way, the way it happened did break individualization. There were still some of us doing a lot of the work, but in the end, something started to change as people began to realize that we were all doing this together. And so Sean, that's what he said. He said as the week went on, people realized how much work was going into it because they saw us running back and forth, and they thought, okay, we're going to get off our asses and help them. And they did. And so, and they said also that people would like to be involved more in the next following events. And I think, I can already see this happening here in a way. So it's nice to see that this is something that just sort of popped up in this context and is continuing. And I hope it continues to happen at future RFN events. So one thing I want to say just to sort of close my part is that this machine with many legs can also be an approach that can be applied to archiving. So let's ask ourselves, what have we accidentally archived in our lives? Who may have accidentally archived what we've done? And maybe start connecting these dots and forming something that will help people after us remember what we've done, and maybe use that as a stepping stone to do more, better, other fantastic things like the ones that we've done. So I'm just going to stop here. And I've also brought my little personal archive, including a bunch of posters that I want to get rid of. So feel free to take one. Find me later and I'll give you one. I've got elastic bands too. I'm really prepared. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Alongside Eamonn, we are part of the collective that organizes the Bristol Radical Film Festival. And why we are here talking from our point of view about archives will become clear in a few minutes. Before we make that explanation, we want to say a little bit about who we are and what we do. And hopefully, one way of showing you that is through the little trailer that we made for the 2017 edition of the festival, in which you will see all the films that we screened and the variety of what we did. And hopefully, this will play. We have some. Please, please. There. Okay, so that's the sort of films that we do every year. Okay, we started, we believe, in 2011, only because the oldest program that we can find is 2012. So things are 2011. But so I know that it kind of sounds silly, but it's kind of, I hope it gives you an idea of how we operate. We are serious enough to have been running for over 10 years and kind of loose enough to kind of having absolutely no idea when we started. Beyond a vague memory of having Steve presence calling me at work and telling me, Humberto, let's go for a coffee, I have an idea. That's it. And when Steve Presence tells you to have, he has an idea, run far and run fast, because that is gonna ruin your life. Okay, so we have been running for over 10 years, and what we do is we screen radical films. And as Steve mentioned in his presentation, we really like the word radical because it's loose enough. So for us, radical, it can mean let's call it less conventional and mainstream form, but fundamentally for us, radical means films that are political in nature. Read political any way you want, so long as it means unambiguously from the left. And again, that is also very open. We are non-partisan, we don't support a particular political party or political organization, but we are always on the left, and that is absolutely explicit for us. And that kind of makes, that is kind of our main idea. Our films are fundamentally contemporary films dealing with contemporary relevant issues, usually around the UK, but also globally. But that doesn't prevent us from engaging with all films. And for that, film archives are very important. The presentation of Steve, it was about kind of 1975, and I remember going with him to the archive, and we found all this old program from the first independent festival of independent films, which actually took place in Bristol in 1975, and we took it over and kind of reimagined it for 40 years later in 2015. And for us, the idea of reimagining it becomes very important because, as to give you an example, a screening of The Amazing Equal Pay Show, which is a monumentally good film, can be reimagined from the archive to the contemporary. All our screenings involve an introduction and a conversation, a discussion, or a Q&A after the screening. So for us, the use of the archive, it was to recuperate not only a brilliant, fairly experimental film like The Amazing Equal Pay Show, but actually to help us to kind of bring up a discussion, for example, about equal pay nowadays, which is still an issue, or for example, about the access, gender equality within the film industry, because the film was made by entirely by women, members of a feminist collective. So for us, the idea of is constantly kind of to reimagine those films in a kind of contemporary form, and giving them kind of a contemporary relevance in relation to the archive. The other thing that we do is all our screenings involve the use of a different type of setting. And it's kind of, the idea of a different setting, it becomes associated with moving away from traditional mainstream spaces of culture. In the city of Bristol, they are kind of very much associated with, they are all very white, very middle class, very expensive. And yes, if you look at us, the irony is not lost on us, but we try to avoid those spaces specifically. Well, that doesn't fit that well, but the other bit, yes. And kind of for us, it's kind of important to move to different kind of spaces. So for us, for example, it is about what we used to call the reimagining of a kind of a different kind of culture, geographical culture within the city of Bristol, which kind of annoys certain elements of the city, but for us it becomes very important to move away from the conventional and to kind of, for example, nowadays, as well as we did at the beginning, we screen our films in a non-for-profit, voluntary-run space in Bristol. And also kind of it involves the production of kind of different types of screening. If the eagle-eyed among you, you can see in that photograph of a bike power screening, and the woman in the center with a little scarf is certain Concha Mateos, who help us by biking for an hour, pedaling for an hour and a half to run the screening, okay? And for us, it's kind of, it becomes associated with something that a British academic called Miriam Ross describes as interstitial screenings, which for us are kind of absolutely what we do. An example of an interstitial screening was the example that you have at the beginning with that screening of that film. Okay, it involves somewhere in between the serious setting of the cinema, with the equipment hidden away in the dark, no eating, no drinking, all kind of very an institutional setting. But the interstitial screening is moving away from that, but it also moves from the screenings at home, where we have lights and we stop to kind of make a cup of coffee or to check our phones, okay? So it's somewhere in between, which help us to construct kind of a particular type of space in which the audiences feel comfortable enough to talk and debate the issues after the screening. They are comfortable enough to kind of contact with each other, to discuss different issues in a different setting. And that for us becomes kind of one of the keys, okay? And now I'm gonna pass on to Eamonn, who will explain you what is our relationship to the idea of the archive.
So we're particularly pleased to be here talking about archive, because strangely enough, over the last year, that's one of the conversations that we've been having ourselves about the history of the festival. And I'm guessing it's not actually a coincidence in some ways. I mean, I think some of these things do arise probably out of the existence of the RFN, because we have this community which has been organised and organising itself for a period where we're always reflecting on films, introducing films, talking about films. And I think that's probably had some kind of weight in that. What the question for us was just really going through our own collection of programming and thinking we actually have quite a valuable resource here that has been built up over this time and may be of use to others. And that's partly our thinking. And also we've been approached a few times, 2 or 3 times in the last year, by other organisations. Quite a mainstream festival in Bath got in touch with us and said, look, you know, we're interested in maybe you might be, you know, put together a programme for us or put some work together. We've also had people more and more asking us, where do you get the films from? Where do you come across these things that aren't even in the kind of regionally, you know, funded art centres and stuff like that? So what that raised for us was the question really of what would an archive look like, and how would it be organised? So we really began starting with this idea of archiving ourselves. Yeah, how do we present ourselves as an archive? I'm also thinking both the comments of David and Contra actually about the biological archive. When you've been around long enough, you actually do become, you know, a biological archive resource, of which I think I've been interviewed 4 times, you know, in the last 18 months about something that happened here or there. But so the questions that led us to really were who is the archive aimed at? Yeah, you know, is it aimed at organisers of film festivals? Is it aimed at the public, the public who come to our screenings and take part in our discussions? Umberto referred to this, but one of the things about our festival is that there's always a discussion. There's always an opening at the end of the screening. We are asking ourselves, you know, what positive things have we learned, and what precise films or things can we share of our experience of running the Radical Film Festival? So we are also grateful to the RFN, and it's a good coincidence, because it did mean that we actually had to do something to start the archive in order to come here and give you a talk about our archive, because otherwise it would be a bit foolish, wouldn't it? And it's prompted us to make some early steps in that. But actually, in a lot of ways, it hasn't been that difficult, because what we're working to is this model, really, of what we want to call the committed archive. So some of you may be familiar with this idea of committed documentary or committed cinema. And this is really a reflection of the way that, for us, the archive would be a practice carried out with a clear contemporary aim. I'm not trying to caricature or over-caricature archive, as just a dusty basement cellar thing, but I think that is often the first thought people have of archives. They're deep, dark places where you go and find things that are a bit lost. I don't mean that disparaging to any archivists here. Talk about the general perception. Whereas for us, the festival and the contemporary aim is to facilitate activity in the near present and the future. So we're thinking of really the work of the term adopted by Thomas War, when he talked about, who really talked about committed cinema and committed documentary, which is the idea that cinema that takes sides, filmmaking that is activist. War talked about committed indicating a specific ideological undertaking, a declaration of solidarity with a goal of radical socio-political transformation. And crucially is a specific political positioning, activism, or intervention in the process of change itself. So, a bit wordy, but as I say, cinema that takes sides. So we were really thinking of the archive then as something which takes sides, as an active archive, an activist archive, which is tied into our practice of activism, and that reflects also our idea of the festival, and they're the purpose, and they're on the purpose of the archive as encapsulating one of an idea expressed by Bertolt Brecht. When speaking of theatre, when he said beautifully, I think, that he wanted to avoid the situation where the audience hang up their brains with their hats in the cloakroom. The idea that we should be provoking debate and activism. So in that sense, we see ourselves now really as beginning to look at a committed archive. So are you going to show a slide there? Oh, you are. Thank you. Right. So, secondly, the other bit in the festival, in addition to being an outlet for film that we've shown, also, so that's the if you like, that's the committed bit and the gathering of a collective and a discussion, but also our experience of where are we finding these films, a history of researching and digging and reaching into the past to find films that kind of work for us in any particular moment, and therefore will be available to others to use. So David was talking about the British poll tax campaign, and we dug up a film called Battle for Trafalgar, an excellent film that was made, and it goes back to something Steve talked about, funnily enough. It was actually financed by Channel 4 and was an exposure of the police violence that took place during the great poll tax revolt and riot in Trafalgar Square. And we showed that film as there was a growing movement at that moment in Britain, which was confronting with the cost of living crisis and cost of energy prices. And there were the beginnings of a campaign of non-payment. So we were able to screen that film in there, and then also to publicise that film as an exploration of launching other campaigns. So, yeah, the questions have been percolating for ages, really. What we wanted to say is that our archive is really, it's an archive of the BRFF, okay? But it's also with a particular aim. And again, that comes out of the festival. The festival started in 2011, but actually it came out of a small milieu of activists who were based around academia, by which I mean students and lecturers, who were involved at that moment in a student revolt which took place over fees, etc., etc. So this idea of connecting the festival, connecting the archive with activism, is something that we want to kind of at the centre really of our archive. So we say that much of our knowledge has been accrued through academic research, but also lots of it as our history of numbers have of activists, or as the group has grown and changed over the time and sometimes shrank to another group of activists. So, for example, we haven't got time to show the film. We're going to show the poster? No, we're going to show the poster that for a film called The Felling of Colston, which was, I don't know if people have heard of this, but we had a mass protest during COVID in Bristol over an historical attempt to remove a statue honouring a slave trader in the centre of the city. In that protest, the statue was torn down, and a film has been made about that and about the campaign for the people who were finally targeted with pulling down the statue, had to go to court, defended themselves, and got off on a jury trial that they acted innocently and for all the right motives to destroy this horrible racist edifice in the city. So we were able to, on the back of that, have a film, screen the film that came out of the campaign, that we were able to have some of the activists involved in the campaign at that moment, which was getting solidarity for the defendants. And so also we want that film to be available to people. This whole thing about statues and history is another live topic. So I've made really the general point, but the key thing is that there is such a rich history of activism in cinema and a rich history worldwide. We have a proud history of anti-racist activism where we've pulled out films from the 1970s by Horace Ove, a film called Pressure. We've had films also from about the formation of the Black Panther Party in the United States, about the Attica uprising, the prison revolts. And again, we're looking to the ways to promote those in a way to other film festivals. I mean, that's pretty much, I've given examples, I think. And I think we're going to come back to you.
So, just to wrap up a couple of ideas. Basically, our intention is kind of to build an archive that, as Eamonn was saying, bridge a gap between the past and the present. How are we going to do that is where we are slightly unsure, because it cannot be just about archiving ourselves in the sense of kind of, look at us, how good we are, this is the stuff that we do. It is useful when we want to convince a particular director to give us a film and we can show you, okay, this is the stuff that we do. Or now that we are trying to get a few quid to help us run the festival, you show this stuff. But that is kind of, for us, is not the main point. What we want to do is kind of something that kind of help us to kind of archive kind of a history of kind of rebellion and of protest and of kind of a particular atmosphere. And it's an archive, as Steve and everybody has been saying, that looks to the future, which I just find out that Jacques Derrida wrote about the archive having a responsibility for tomorrow, which I kind of actually like a lot. So basically, kind of, it becomes kind of a way of trying to archive a history of Bristol itself, and we are part of that, or a little bit part of that history, in a way in which finally kind of, if we can think of our archive to be an intervention that sets up new and critically engaged forms of dialogue, both within and beyond the material itself, which is kind of an idea from Phil Collins. So that's what we are trying to do.
Sorry, just the other bit to add was, again, about this active archive, is that the other bit we twigged, which sounds a bit obvious now, is actually a lot of the films are already available online. And actually it's taking the archive, we prefer to have the discussion, obviously, in the festival, but there's a whole number of films now that that hopefully we'll be able to put on the site, which are on YouTube or on Vimeo, etc. And therefore you can expand those to people who are not within reach of a city like Bristol that has a film festival, etc. So that's the other bit about making it an instant, accessible archive as opposed to something that you have to dive in deep to find.
That's it.
Okay, well, thanks for the presentations. And now I think we have a bit of time for about 20 minutes for questions. So Does anybody want to? Yes.
Hi, my name is Mosa. Thank you so much for the presentations. They were really useful and interesting. I've been thinking a lot recently. I'm a film programmer, and I do that in Scalarama Festival and Black Cinema Project, and I do a lot of touring African archive film. And I've been thinking a lot recently about the archiving of curatorial practice as a way to be useful for people who want to do further programming. So obviously in Scalarama, we help people find licenses and teach them how to put on their own film screenings. And I've been reflecting recently on how hard it is to find film licenses, and we seem to gatekeep that information, but actually I don't think we need to. And when you're archiving your past festivals or editions, have you considered putting the license information online? Because it could just be an email or just breadcrumbs to help people know where to look for those licenses, because it's something with the programming of African cinema that I'm doing. I'm now trying to encourage cinemas to put the distributor information on their pages, because I just don't see why we don't share that information. It's kind of a question / remark.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Hi. Yeah. I have never thought about that, and just Eamonn just whispered in my ear, brilliant. And I entirely agree. That is a fantastic idea, and we are going to do that. Thank you very much. It never occurred to me, because actually, for us, one of the key things is actually we have just managed to get the rights for a film that we have been chasing for 18 months, because we didn't know how to find the rights. So thank you very much. That was brilliant.
Can I add something to that? That also helps, particularly when there are grassroots distributors, to make themselves known. Because, for example, in Genova, we screened a few films from OpenDDB, which is a grassroots distributor run by some comrades that we've known and worked with for some time. And so it also helps them to make their work known as distributors.
Sorry, a bit hiding over here. Hi. I just have a comment about, as an archivist also, you saying like you don't want to just archive about your history and look at us kind of thing. I think you actually absolutely need to do that. Because I think that it's imperative for other collectives and activists to also learn from your structure and how it moved forward, the issues that were in there, the arguments that were happening, and so on. So I think that is politically very important, but also because once we put all of this available, then it will also be up to other politically engaged activists, academics, etc., to take this information and then situate it in a momentum. Like, even if you just give us your programming for a certain year, it's also our work as researchers and archivists and academics and so on to contextualize all of this. And if we have also information from what is happening behind closed doors, that is even better, because it gives us all the thought process. And I find sometimes activists and leftist organizations a bit too humble to put themselves forward like this. And my final comment, if I may also, is about, like, I appreciate all the access that is going to happen online and is happening online, and this drive for digitizing and making accessible. But I also want to emphasize the importance of collective spaces of watching movies together. I feel like social media already individualizes us a lot, and there is something that is much more beautiful and extra in these spaces that you create as festivals, and where people can come and be in communion and discuss and be angry at each other. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the last thing you said, we felt it particularly 2 years ago when we had not been able to have a conference or festival for quite a while. And it still didn't feel totally safe, but we were outside and all that. So yeah, that is important. But I also think that, so the experience of coming together And that being not just our perspective on it, though I take your point that we need to share our internal squabbles and sort of decision-making conversation about that kind of stuff. I think that's good. And those are the kinds of questions that I asked David when I decided to take on the organization of Genova in 2022. But I also think that the archive, and something I forgot to say clearly, the archive being done and put together collectively also makes it richer, because it's not just your experience, it's also the experiences of all the people who came, participated, did a part of it, and actually they see that from a different perspective. Even just seeing what Laura and Sean had to say about the process that I was sort of leading in a way, coordinating, not really leading, but it made me see it in a different way. And I think that's a really important thing. And in addition to that, it takes some of the weight off the shoulders of the people who are already taking on so much. And the other thing I wanted to say about the digitalization, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to bring in a bit of a negative point here, but digitalization has a dark side. All the cloud storage that we are relying on is incredibly damaging for the environment. This is something that I'm only recently becoming very aware of, and I'm thinking that we need to maybe think about some old school practices that don't involve having servers that host our data in that way, because that's something that maybe we need to think about collectively as a network, as, how do we store our stuff? Because we talk about, in the last AGM in Genova, we talked about having funding for people to travel by train instead of by plane, but apparently cloud storage is responsible for a whole lot of emissions, and it's something that a lot of people, I think, don't really consider.
Oh, sorry, just the other bit I should have made clear is that we have got all of our programs up on our website now. So there is 10 years worth of program. If you click on a poster, it'll open up and there'll be the program for the festival. So we actually have started that, but thank you for that. Yeah.
And I also wanted kind of a little reflection. I think all those ideas about what to bring into the archive are absolutely, as I said, brilliant. All of it, and putting even our kind of own history and our struggles of how we do this. But we also kind of forget that how much time and effort it takes to do this. We have no technical skills whatsoever. You know how long it took me to do this crap? Okay, a whole weekend. Okay, 10 days ago there was no BRFF archive. Okay, and I was kind of, damn, we are going to Madrid. I have to build this thing. Okay, I had no idea how to do it. Okay, so it's rubbish, I know, but it's the best I can do. Okay, so if you ask me to put more information and more things, it's time consuming. Is incredibly, we had all sorts of weird ideas. So one of the things that we are going to do now, I just seen the light. I'm going to put a link that we have at the top to the RFN in big, okay? And I can use all the contact information from the RFN, the links to the films and all that kind of thing. But we cannot forget that also kind of building an archive, okay, takes time, takes effort, takes knowledge, okay? It's all that kind of thing. So, if we come, but slowly.
I just want to add something to that, just to go back to the idea of intergenerational solidarity. Maybe we need some in the other direction, because we're a bunch of boomers.
Thank you very much. It was really, really lovely to hear all of your experiences. I loved seeing the performance art type stuff of the bicycle-powered screening. That was amazing. I was just going to highlight, I think it was really, really nice, the participatory archives, like the zine building, for example, and it's cool seeing all of these websites that are like tailor-made to sort of navigate around and make more accessible all of these archives. And just, sharing ways of working, like, to make those more participatory as well, because I can often find websites can feel quite fixed or like a one-way kind of system. So I can see like there's links to social media and stuff as well, and it can be like a bit of a concerted effort to try and like share posts sporadically like directing people to all these pockets in the archives. But there's also like participatory web pages, like interactive learning technologies, like Padlet, for example, and Miro, which can be quite a nice way of like connecting people together. And yeah, we can share a bit of that in the panel on Friday anyway. And yeah, I really like the idea as well of letting a festival sort of live longer than the fixed kind of city and time frame event. Yeah, and making films, the ones that are accessible on YouTube anyway, like accessible to everyone wider. There's been a lot of experiences like David, Bob and I have had of like sharing the work online, and it's super valuable to be here in person. But yeah, hopefully maybe can share some instances of those participatory web platforms like Padlet to allow people to contribute to that archive. Yeah, anyway, sorry, just want to say thank you though.
Yeah. Any more questions? We are anyway running out of time, right? So, well, thank you for the presentation. Thanks for this enlightening approach to the archive issue in relation to the experiences of the Radical Film Network. And thank you, everybody. I mean, just wanted to, what? I'm going to say about the film.
No, I have to give the instructions.
Okay. So, well, just to remind you, we have the film Dulcinea by Paloma Polo at 8:30. It says 8, I think, in the website of, but it's at 8:30. The place is like half an hour away from here, half an hour walk. And for those of you, if you still don't have a ticket, we have free tickets, so just let us know so we can provide you with a ticket. And I don't know if you want to say something else.
And only remember that this session has been registered by the bookshop, the Traficantes de Sueños, and it is going to be uploaded to his web page, because they have this regular habit of archiving. So if anybody can't agree, tell, because they wouldn't upload the registration. This is all. Everybody's okay?
Well, thanks.
Okay. It was a problem because